Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Today, we report on an assassination attempt on yet another high-profile Khalistan campaigner in the US. Yep, it looks like India is still at it. We discover how violence against women in India is so endemic, it now even reaches governmental level. And we'll look at the plight of farmers. So under attack economically and politically, it's driving huge numbers to suicide. All that and much more. And joining me, as always, for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to all of our amazing viewers out there.
Indeed, and together we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. Of course, as usual, we will be taking a look at lots of your wonderful comments that we have been receiving by the bucketful, so thanks as always for those. So, James, let's start off with your first story. What are you going to kick us off with today?
Well, as you touched on in the intro there, the rates of suicide are just at staggering levels when it comes to the farmers in India, and a disproportionate number even more in the Punjab region. So this is something that we've seen for quite some time. It's been brought up over and over again, but it seems that the numbers are once again on the rise. And with that, of course, the Modi government has really got to step it up and start doing something about it, because he sees the farmers, in my opinion, he sees them as expendable. And of course, that is not the case. So I'm just going to stop the share there and bring up the right story for you. But again, it is something that the government has been overlooking for quite some time. And it's not only government policy, but there are extra factors in it, including the monsoons, the weather, the climate change, the droughts in some regions. And it just continues on. Within the last 10 years, it's estimated 112 suicides of farmers in India. And these numbers are just, as I said, going up and going up. And it's got to find a breaking point in terms of saving the farmers from these incidents of violence against themselves, but also the financial devastation. They don't see an out. Their numbers are going down. Their Modi government's trying to push a lot more corporate in terms of the farm conglomerates to take over these smaller farms. When you combine that with the Modi's lack of concern for the Punjab region and the Sikhs in India, of course, he is looking again at piling people into that region to dilute the Sikh population. But also, this is another way for him to limit the numbers of Sikhs in the area by forcing them into destitute situations where they cannot support a family with even the basics of life. And as you can see, the numbers are just staggering at that point. And again, they are on the rise, which is really, we should be seeing at this point, since it's been going on for years, numbers going down. And that's not the case. Even last year, when I spoke to Dr. Singh Sidhu at the Surrey Gurdwara, he had even brought this up, and we spoke briefly about the farmers in a much larger interview about India relations and issues. And I'll bring up that interview now. That's just a quick clip of it, and you can catch the full interview on our archive section of Satellite TV from last year with the referendum vote in Surrey, is where we took this, or where we conducted this interview. And it's obviously been something that people are speaking out about ever since, and it just continues to be a major issue. And this was the interview here where we spoke about the farmers. And we've seen that with the violence going on in Manipur and other regions of India where they are attacking and going after different groups, including the Sikhs, including Christians, and so forth. So I think that this is a very powerful vote, not only in the results of the vote one way or the other, but also just in the awareness of what's been going on since 1947 with the separation of India, or when you go back to 1984 and the Golden Temple. I think that it's very important for the whole world to be watching what's going on.
That's exactly right. The fundamental journey to the destination which is independence of Punjab. But while we are traveling the journey, walking the walk, we are achieving tremendous success. So just like, let's say, Modi's government promulgated farm laws. Those farm laws were not right for the farmers. They may be right for the high officials in the government or big business people, but it's not good for the small farmer. So when the referendum voting took place in London, October 31st, 2021, 3 weeks after that, Modi basically annulled the farm laws because it was that the Indian intelligence agencies told Modi that this is a threat to security and safety of India. Therefore, the law should be annulled, and he announced that we're going to annul it without having taken a vote in the parliament.
So again, as you can see, he brings up the different laws and the way in which the Modi government is trying to force farmers out for the small farmers. And again, with the Modi government's lack of concern for the Punjab region and their want to keep it as a part of India and push out the Sikhs. Again, this is something that's been spoken about for years and years, but the international community has to take notice. I mean, 112 suicides in 10 years, and now the numbers are climbing exponentially. So it's just a devastating and desperate situation, Angus.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues around this, and funnily enough, it's not even just specific to the Punjab and India. It's actually this whole story is played out across the world. We have seen farmers' protests across the Western world and many parts of the globe, really, over the last year or two. And there seems to be an almost concerning lack of foresight and understanding by many governments about just how important food infrastructure is. And particularly in India, where the Punjab is seen as this political pawn by the BJP and the RSS, because of course there has been this long-term agenda just to try and essentially destroy the Sikh nation, destroy Sikh culture and the Sikh way of life. But of course, by doing that, you are destroying decades, if not even centuries, of farming expertise. The Punjab is the breadbasket of India. It forms part of absolutely fundamental, critical security infrastructure of India as a nation. And as Modi's government is determined to try and oppress and destroy the Sikh community, at the same time, they are, as we say in English, they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. They're actually they're cutting the nose off to spite their face. Another cliche. What they're doing is they are damaging India's own capability to feed its nation by oppressing Sikhs and by driving farmers to suicide, as clearly it has been happening over many years. There are all that experience, not least the personal tragedy and the human tragedy of that. They are, as a nation, to be perfectly ruthless about it, they are losing their own capability to grow their own food. A nation that has the largest population on the planet. So one has to wonder the political motivation behind this. Is it deeply a deep lack of foresight, a deep lack of understanding of what actually they are doing in the long term to their own nation by oppressing farmers, by destroying farmers? Yeah, clearly the Punjabi Sikh farmers are being used as political pawns. There is an agenda to damage and destroy them, as we report on regularly. But the damage that is doing to India as a nation is frightening, frankly. But as I say, this problem plays out across the Western world as well. Our farmers here in the UK, in the US, Canada, and across Europe, they are being, for some reason, there is this agenda to try and damage and reduce their capability to grow the global food crops. Why? I don't know. That is. I'm sure there's a whole debate around that whole subject. But the bottom line is the result of this is that our food production is reducing our yields, whilst they're trying to increase yields massively. At the same time, they're actually driving farmers out of business. Now, one could again conspiratorially argue that actually they're driving it into the hands of corporate farmers and they're driving the smaller farmer out of business. Well, maybe, but ultimately what matters is the overall crop yields. Are they reducing? Are they increasing? But the bottom line is the human tragedy underlying all this is terrible. That every farmer that commits suicide is leaving a family behind. And I talk about the West, but of course this is happening in Punjab, an area that is already suffering, and families are already suffering after decades of oppression. So yeah, I think I do find this story very concerning, and it is the responsibility of every government to support farming and to support farmers. Farming is actually a very, very hard way of life. Farmers are probably some of the hardest working people in the world, whichever nation they live in. And I know certainly here in the UK, our farmers are extraordinarily hard working. They have to work 365 days a year, unlike many other industries and professions. So, and economically, running a farm is desperately hard. Many farmers, most farmers, are living literally on the breadline. They are living a subsistence living. And it is up to governments to support farmers economically, financially. They have got to stay in business because, as I said at the beginning, fundamentally, farmers feed our nations. Without food, our societies fall apart, literally, and people die. So food is fundamental to our existence. So it is the responsibility of every single government, and even in India, Mr. Modi's government, have a responsibility to ensure the health of their farming sector. And that, of course, relies on the people who are the farmers. They are the expertise. They bring with them generations of expertise to increase those crop yields. So, yeah, I'm afraid, James, it's a lack of foresight for political games, and ultimately everybody loses on this one.
Absolutely. And the scary thing is that they say that the numbers are highly underreported as well. So the numbers are, potentially much even higher than that. The last official number that we have is 2022, but we'll be watching to see when the new numbers do come out, and we'll update the story at that point. But we do know from people on the ground and the human rights groups that the numbers are substantially higher and increasing.
Yeah, terrible. As I say, it happens here in the UK as well. It's just purely because it is such a hard life, economically, financially, and just physically. It's an extraordinarily hard life. Farmers need our support. The protests that swept across India in 2020 and 2021, and of course this year, they weren't there just for the fun of it. They had genuine concerns, and all they faced were lines of police armed with rubber bullets, with shotgun pellets, and real live ammunition and tear gas. That's the treatment they received. These are the people feeding our nations. They should not be treated like this. So yeah, thanks for that, James.
That's right. No problem. And we'll scurry right along to the next story, try to keep us within our time again for a change. So our next story is talking again about the rights of women and the scary numbers of rapes and violence against women across the country. Now, this, of course, has been struck up by the 31-year-old female doctor in training that was attacked, it was raped, and it was murdered at the hospital in Calcutta. Now, the nationwide strike has now entered into its third week, and people are still marching in the streets by the tens of thousands. And here you'll see an image, and this is actually rival football clubs that are out there to protest in support of women's rights, in support of women's security and their safety, and demanding that the government make changes that are going to support women in all areas of the country, not just in Bengal, but across the nation, because this has really sparked a conversation and an international light on the problem. And it is just amazing how much people have overlooked this for generations. And it's time now. I mean, we're in 2024. We need to be protecting women. We need to be treating them as equals, and we need to make sure that they are safe, especially in a hospital, in a workplace where she is working to save lives. Now, as you can see, the football players came out and just very clearly stated that they don't care about their rivalry on the pitch, but when they are off, they need to come together and to really stand united against this problem. And there is a demand for not just justice, but further in terms of the safety of healthcare workers and others throughout the city, throughout the country. And this one here is a statement by Bablu Mukherjee, and a supporter of the Mohun Bagan soccer team. And he says, "We have forgotten our rivalries to make common cause in calling for justice for the doctor and her family. This is bigger than our club, even bigger than politics." So it's beautiful to see how people are coming together to demand change. But again, it's whether or not the Modi government and regional governments, law enforcement are willing to actually change the entire mindset of a nation to demand better treatment. The women, the lady and the doctor that was killed, her family has spoken up, but they have been protecting the family's identity because she cannot be named as a result of certain laws that protect victims in India, which I think is amazing that they're protecting the victims. But how about protecting them before they become victims? And that is really what it's all about. So there was a lot of chant, there was a lot of call for humanity and to make things better for everyone. And with this, people are concerned about the process of law and the courts. But it, again, is a system that hopefully can hold them accountable and actually be following the rule of law to do so. Here it's stated that sexual violence against women is a widespread problem in India, which we are aware of. And it says an average of nearly 90 rapes a day were reported in 2022 in the country of 1.4 billion people. And again, the majority of rapes are gone unreported because women do not feel safe in reporting. They feel like they are victimized all over again. And many times they are. When they report, they are victimized over and over by the system and others throughout the community. So it's important that the world speak up and demand that the human rights groups just hold the Modi and other government officials accountable, make change to protect women. And these are people's daughters, people's mothers, people's sisters. You know, how can you allow this to continue day after day, year after year, Angus? It's just a disgusting situation that it's nice to see people demanding the change, but we need to see actual results and actual policy in place that does just that.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'm almost speechless that on an almost daily basis we have to report this story because it's just shocking. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. I mean, the statistic there, 90 rapes a day. One of our commenters, and I think I've highlighted this comment in our comments section. We'll talk about later. But even one of our commenters said, "Look, rape is part of Indian culture, whether you deny it or not." And clearly, 90 rapes a day occurring. Okay, it's a very large population, but 90 rapes a day is a statistic that is just horrifying. In that it does imply that sexual violence against women isn't just endemic, it's just part of the culture. It's almost become the norm. I mean, thank heavens that there are enough people in India standing up and taking to the streets saying, look, this has got to stop. And let's hope that momentum really builds now after what's happened recently. But clearly there is a very large section of Indian society that still thinks it is okay to perpetrate violence against women, sexual or any type of violence. And India still remains, we reported recently about the laws over marital rape. So even within the foundation of marriage, marital rape is still effectively legal. It is only, I think, one of 36 countries only left in the world that still effectively has not criminalised marital rape, something that certainly in the Western world we disposed of, centuries ago, literally, because we realised how immoral and wrong it was, how fundamentally and legally and morally wrong it was. And yet in India, marital rape still remains a big issue. So, James, I mean, I shake my head in despair here. Now, fortunately, there does seem to be momentum building now, and we did talk about this the other day, and we said that the change, a cultural change in India, will take a generation. You cannot change an ingrained behavioural trait overnight. It does take a lot of effort. It does take a multilateral approach. It takes efforts through every possible outlet, including schools, television, the media, through political policies, through legal frameworks, through criminalisation of things like this. It takes a huge effort from every possible angle to essentially indoctrinate and re-educate a whole population to say, look, this is wrong. And after about a generation, these things then do change. But let's hope that it doesn't take a generation to reduce the desperate levels of violence that is still happening on a daily basis in India. So yeah, James, it's heartbreaking to see this story just runs and runs.
And as I said, the amount of attacks and such that go unreported way outnumber the ones that are reported, statistically speaking. So it's just a shame to see this happening.
Yeah, I think that is a key point here. You think about the numbers that actually, we say 90 rapes a day. That's just the reported statistics. Of course, marital rape.
Yeah.
How often does that go on a daily basis? And then, of course, the lower caste women who are treated like absolute dirt in India. How often are they subjected to sexual abuse and sexual violence? I have no doubt regularly on a daily basis. Of course, they won't be reported. They'll be too afraid to report it. That is the inherent weakness and inherent failure of Indian society. It's absolutely appalling. Which does lead me on to my first story. And that is, of course, following this whole story of how endemic sexual violence is in India. It isn't just restricted to its just general population. I've referred to already as a cultural problem. Well, guess what? It actually goes all the way up the ladder into the government. Now, here's a report that was released just a few days ago. Get this. 151 sitting members of the Lok Sabha and MLAs, that's members of the legislative assemblies, have cases of crimes against women. 16 of them charged with rape. These are elected members of parliament in India. West Bengal tops the list with 25 sitting MPs and MLAs facing charges related to crimes against women, followed by Andhra Pradesh with 21 and Odisha with 17. And among the political parties, here we go, the BJP has the highest number of representatives, that's 54 MPs and MLAs, with declared cases related to crimes against women. That's 54 members of parliament and MLAs with cases of violence, sexual violence against women. As many as 151 sitting MPs and MLAs have declared cases in their election affidavits, with West Bengal having, of course, the highest number of lawmakers facing such cases. Now, West Bengal does top that list with 25 sitting MPs and MLAs facing charges, followed by, as I said, Andhra Pradesh and Odisha with 17. But according to the report, this comes amid the nationwide protest that we have reported on over the alleged rape and murder of a trainee doctor in a state-run hospital in Kolkata and the sexual assault of 2 children in Thane. Now, according to the report, there are 16 sitting MPs and MLAs who declared cases related to rape under Indian Penal Code IPC section 376, which carries a minimum sentence of 10 years and can be extended to life imprisonment. Of these, 2 are MPs and 14 MLAs. So you've got 16 elected representatives facing one of the most serious crimes of rape against women. I mean, again, I'll use the word speechless. It's shocking. And the charges included repeated offences against the same victim, underscoring further the gravity of these cases. So among the political parties, and this is worth highlighting again, the BJP has the highest number of representatives. That is 54 MPs and MLAs with declared cases related to crimes against women, followed by Congress with 23 and the TDP, that's the Telugu Desam Party, with 17. And both BJP and Congress have 5 sitting lawmakers, each facing rape charges. So the authors of the report have issued strong recommendations, unsurprisingly, in response to these findings, and it's stressed on the need for political parties to refrain from giving tickets to candidates with criminal backgrounds. Well, you would think that would be pretty fundamental when they choose candidates for their parties. especially those with charges of rape and other crimes against women. Now, I mean, I hate to sort of state the obvious, but certainly here in the West, if you have ever been charged with rape, for example, there is absolutely no chance you could stand as a member of certainly the British Parliament, and I'm sure that is the case in Canada and the US, and certainly across Europe. It would be an immediate barring offence to stand for any public office. And yet, here in India, in the governing party, the BJP, it is full of rapists. It's unbelievable. So the report also called for the fast tracking of court cases against MPs and MLAs, ensuring professional and thorough investigations by police. Well, fast tracking them, good luck in the Indian legal system, which is not known for its fast tracking of things. And the ADR, who were behind this report, urged voters to avoid electing candidates with such charges. Yeah, I mean, one has to question the voters, the BJP voters. I mean, come on, BJP voters. I mean, it's all very well supporting a party, but if you're voting for a candidate who is up on a rape charge, what does that say about your moral principles? And we have to turn the spotlight onto the standard BJP voter. You are voting for candidates who are facing rape charges. You have to look at your own moral standards, your own moral compass, and think to yourself, why am I voting for a rapist? It just shocks me that this is happening. And as a result, we reported, of course, and James, you've been talking about this case of the awful case of the doctor who was raped and murdered in Kolkata. India's Supreme Court did say a couple of days ago that they've ordered a national task force to be formed to take or pay attention to healthcare workers, and particularly focus on healthcare workers after that awful rape. And Chief Justice Chandrachud has run out an order which called for the formation of this national task force of top doctors to prepare a plan to prevent violence in healthcare facilities and draw up an enforceable national protocol for safe working conditions. Now, OK, thank you for that. And it's all very well for the healthcare profession. But of course, as we said yesterday, it's only because a doctor, of course, somebody in, let's just say, the elite, the working elite of India, because a doctor gets raped and murdered, it's hit the national headlines. What about the lower caste women? What about the ordinary women in the street, in the lower caste, in the more poverty-stricken areas of India? Women who aren't doctors, women who are in very lower level jobs, whose rapes and murders don't hit the headlines on a daily basis. What about them? Now, we of course do applaud any initiative to reduce sexual crime, but this has got to be not just limited to the healthcare sector. This has got to be rolled out across the nation. As I said, it's got to be a cultural shift across India. And the buck stops with Narendra Modi. Mr. Modi, you are leading a party of rapists. You are leading a party of people, men, who have perpetrated sexual violence against women. So, firstly, why are these people in your party? Secondly, why are you presiding over a nation that has to witness on a daily basis at least 90 rapes a day? The buck stops with Narendra Modi and the BJP. So my simple statement is, stop oppressing and wasting your energy against Sikh farmers. Sort out something morally reprehensible like the rape of your nation's women. It's not hard. Let's just start with the basics. If you want to be a first world country, we have to stop simple things like the sexual violence against women. Forget your political games against the Punjab. Sort out your own house. That's my simple message. I'm appalled by these statistics. I'm appalled by the lack of action by the Indian government about this, James.
Absolutely, Angus, and no other country would allow for these numbers and this attitude towards acceptance to happen within their borders. And it's just disgusting that they have so many politicians in position of making the laws, enforcing the laws from a parliamentary standpoint, and allow them just to continue on business as usual.
Yeah, I mean, as I said just then, Mr. Modi and the BJP's focus seems to be more interested in assassinating Khalistan campaigners overseas rather than protecting his own women in his own streets. I am appalled, and that will lead me on to, naturally, my next story, which is, yes, they're at it again. That has been, it appears, another assassination attempt against a Khalistani campaigner in the United States. So, Sikhs for Justice have reported on their social media outlets over the last couple of days a failed, fortunately, assassination attempt on a US-based Khalistani campaigner, an associate, as it turns out, of the martyr, the Shahid Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada. So this incident occurred last week. It was actually the 11th of August, and it involved a volunteer organiser of the referendum that's currently being rolled out across the Americas at the moment. A gentleman called Satinder Pal Singh Raju. His vehicle was sprayed with bullets on Interstate 505 near San Francisco over in California. And the news has been reported by Sikhs for Justice. So a video has been released, this video of Raju's vehicle showing the bullet holes through a window and further damage to the interior. Fortunately, Raju himself escaped with no serious injuries. So this latest shooting is just one in a long series of assassinations and assassination attempts targeting Khalistan campaigners by India. And we are alleging it's by India, but of course, the targets, there's a common theme here. Why is it always Khalistan campaigners? I don't think it's just local criminal networks just with a particular grudge against Khalistan campaigners. There's the only explanation. It has to be perpetrated by somebody with a political desire to remove Khalistan campaigners. And of course, it's pretty obvious where it has to be coming from. And clearly, India has been accused of this. There clearly is evidence pointing back to India and its intelligence services, and yet they are still at it, it appears. So, Sikhs for Justice General Counsel Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, he, of course, faced his own assassination attempt last year in New York, which, of course, the Department of Justice in the US fortunately thwarted. They did actually catch somebody trying to pay $100,000 to assassinate Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon to a gunman for hire, which, of course, then led on to the whole Nikhil Gupta affair, which we have been talking about over the last few days. And of course, there was another attempt on a Brampton-based activist, Inderjit Singh Gosal, a few months ago, back in February, shortly before another alleged assassination attempt over in Italy of another Khalistan referendum organiser, part of that, the referendum that took place in Italy. But as more of these attempted murders occur, specifically targeting Khalistan campaigners, it's now compounding this evidence that it can only be the Indian state behind this extrajudicial killing campaign. And we do know, historically, that extrajudicial killing is a modus operandi of the Indian government, as they have demonstrated over the last few decades. So, of course, the assassination of Nijjar in Canada last year triggered a major geopolitical fallout, which has, of course, seen the Five Eyes nations, Canada, USA, Australia, UK, they have combined their intelligence and they have confirmed that there is evidence pointing to this whole campaign of transnational repression against Sikhs, against the Sikh diaspora. And we have reported, of course, the trials that are ongoing in Canada, the 4 gentlemen that have been arrested and charged with the Nijjar killing, of course, of Indian descent, and the Department of Justice in the US, the ongoing trial of Nikhil Gupta. Now, we've also, talked about this character, Major Arya, Gaurav Arya. He's another right-wing extremist mouthpiece of the Indian government. And again, he is always talking about how organised crime should be paid. The mafia should be paid to target Khalistan campaigners. We do know that he actually carries a lot of weight. He's a very powerful influencer in India, but is also well known as an ex-army officer. He's also well known and assumed to have very strong links to the Indian government and Indian intelligence, because the stories and the videos that he comes out with and the messages he sends out always contain very strongly supported evidence that it clearly has to come from higher up the chain of the Indian government, because the things he talks about could only come from the higher echelons of the Indian government. And he regularly does talk about targeting Khalistan campaigners. He regularly talks about perpetrating violence against Khalistani campaigners, particularly across the West. And he did notoriously even say, firstly, when Bayaftar Singh Kandar was or met his end, sadly, last year under very suspicious circumstances here in the UK, that he was targeted by this same person, saying he must be taken out. And lo and behold, a few days later, he died under very suspicious circumstances, which, to the UK government's shame, still have not investigated. And the story goes on, and we could talk about it for hours, but I am just astonished once again that the Sikh organisations have to unite again to point out this transnational repression campaign, that India does appear to still be at it. This spraying of bullets against another organiser of this referendum. It's just overt. It's blatant. I'm just astonished that even now that the US government, the Canadian government have now started taking actual tangible steps against India in the form of legal action and this investigation now tracing up the chain of command, at the moment starting with Nikhil Gupta, that India has the brazen, blatant nerve to actually perpetrate another potential killing, James. I'm quite astonished they've got the nerve and the barefaced cheek to even try it again.
Absolutely. And I mean, even Mr. Najjar's brother has been the subject of threats and attempts on his life. He has been warned by authorities that there is a threat there towards him still, and he refuses to hide. As we know, he was out last month at the Khalistan referendum in Calgary, and he just refuses to let the India government or the other individuals potentially involved, keep him in hiding or to interfere with his life and his movement to allow others to have their voices heard. And there's also reports that that RAW is still offering bounties or rewards to people who supply the location of higher-ups in the Khalistan referendum movement. So it's obvious that India still thinks they can get away with this crap.
Yeah, and I often take a very simplistic view of this, but if I was Narendra Modi, J&K and the Punjab are a permanent thorn in the Indian government's side. These issues are never going to go away. The Khalistan campaign isn't just not going to go away, it's growing, it's building momentum. More and more people are swarming to the ranks of the Khalistan campaign. We've seen Amritpal Singh elected with a massive majority standing on a Khalistan ticket in the Punjab. So Mr. Modi has to realise these issues are never going to go away, and they are just going to grow and become a bigger thorn in the Indian government side. So why not cast aside the northwest of India? Why not just carve it away? You don't need it. Yes, I admit the Punjab is the breadbasket of India, but that is not to say that if you grant the Punjab self-determination and it does break away as a small independent nation, that Khalistan has no argument with India. Quite the opposite. It will be deeply grateful for India allowing it its self-determination, and it would be more than happy to supply India with the grain and the crops and the agricultural harvest that India would dearly need. So it would stand as a friend. So again, from a very simplistic perspective, it's so easy for the Indian government just to get rid of this one problem that has been plaguing them for decades. They can just carve it away. They're not actually losing an awful lot of geographical territory, but they are getting rid of something that is denuding India's resources. There's 500,000 troops, for example, in J&K that actually they need elsewhere to buttress China. They don't need them in J&K suppressing their own people. And all the resources, the money that they have to pour into suppressing the Sikhs, the Khalistan movement. And of course, the international stage. India is losing credibility. India is embarrassing itself. India is damaging itself by this ridiculous campaign. I mean, how important are Khalistan campaigners to the overall future of India? They're not. The Khalistan campaign in the whole context of India as a future superpower is nothing. So why damage your own potential future as a superpower with something as trivial, effectively, relatively speaking, something as trivial as Khalistan? So why not India? Why not just let Punjab just carve itself away and you remove a thorn in your side forever. And instead, you actually will have a friend on your border. It's not hard. I do wish that the strategists in India would actually give this serious consideration. Surely it must be a simple fix. It's an easy fix. It's the path of least resistance, which all governments want. So it's just a simple almost request to the Indian government from our humble voice. Why not just consider it? Because it will solve so many problems in one single fell swoop. So, James, any thoughts on that?
I just can't agree with you enough that I think it would be mutually beneficial for both sides. I just think that there's so much to gain by it moving forward. Punjab having its own rule and the cooperation and trade that can go amongst them in a peaceful way, and the support from each other back and forth is just, I just can't say enough how much I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, J&K is a little bit more complex with the Islamic militant problem. And I do think that Absolutely. That solution is not quite as clear cut as the Punjab, but the Punjab certainly is, to me, I struggle to find arguments against it for India other than, of course, the breadbasket argument. But as I said, it's very easy for as conditional upon the whole self-determination issue. It's very easy to put conditions upon there. There must be a guaranteed supply of agricultural products, which of course Khalistan would be more than happy to export its crops to India. But anyway, let's move on, Jason. We are of course up against the clock once again. So a quick final story, and this is an interesting geopolitical story, and it does again show the how blurred the lines are and how many grey areas exist in the whole diplomatic relations between India and the US, and the complex dynamics in this geopolitical situation of India, China and the US, because it turns out that India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh is about to embark tomorrow on a 4-day visit to the US with the aim of strengthening the global strategic partnership between the US and India. Now, during Mr. Singh's time in Washington, apparently he is the goal is to engage in discussions with the US's Defence Secretary, Lloyd Austin, and of course with the US Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, and many other key officials. Now, high on the agenda will be India's plan to acquire lots and lots of military hardware, which includes 31 MQ-9B Predator drones. Yes, these are military drones. The proposed joint production of Stryker infantry combat vehicles and the co-manufacturing of GE F414 engines in India, as per a report now going across the newswires. Now, according to the US Relations and Defence Ministry, the statement was the visit is anticipated to further deepen and expand the India-US comprehensive global strategic partnership. And the trip comes against the backdrop of increasing momentum in India-US relations and defence cooperation at various levels. Now, in addition to these discussions, Singh will preside over a high-level roundtable with the US defence industry, focusing on current and future defence collaborations. And he'll also meet with the Indian community in the US whilst he's there. Now, on top of that, it's been also announced that Narendra Modi will make a US visit later this year. He's due to, or is scheduled to visit the US to address the high-level UN General Assembly session on September the 26th, so next month, according to a provisional list of speakers issued by the UN. And Modi will also address members, again, like Mr. Singh, of the Indian American community at a mega diaspora event at the 16,000-seater Nassau Coliseum in Long Island. So this is interesting in that we do obviously say that the US, and we know the US is very keen and is working at great extent to extend that hand of friendship to India, saying, look, you've got to align with the US. We know why. The US needs India alongside the West to buttress China. It's pretty obvious. And interestingly, India is entertaining these discussions. One could cynically argue that India is entertaining these discussions because it is in its own interest, financially, commercially. Of course, we're talking about massive defence contracts here. India is offering to build some multi-billion-dollar military hardware for the US. So, of course, there's a lot in it financially for India. And, of course, there's a lot in it financially for the US and, of course, strategically for the US. So the one good side, the high-level headline of this is actually good news. It is pointing to the fact that India is quite keen to improve its ties with the West, particularly with the US. But one also does worry deeper down, as we have reported on many occasions, is that can we really trust India? Because, of course, it still maintains its strong links with Moscow. We do know, of course, India is scared of China. It fears China on its doorstep, and rightly so. So it does mean India does need the West, whether it likes it or not. India needs the West. And we look 20, 30, 50 years ahead when the world could be in a very different geopolitical position. The dynamics could be extremely different. We do know, of course, China and India will be leading superpowers certainly in half a century's time. But the alliances in 50 years' time will really set the future, and I'm talking centuries ahead, will set the global framework as we go forward. And the ties that are being tied up now will set the foundations for those relationships in 30 years, 50 years' time. So it's really important that India actually, frankly, has to make up its mind as sides are being taken. China is working its way through the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. It's tying it up its own strategic geographical alliances with all sorts of islands, small island nations, to give it its own military and naval beachheads in strategic locations. India, of course, is doing its own work, but to a much lesser extent. And I think India is being encircled by China, as we have said regularly. So India needs to think very carefully about its future alliances. Well, to me, it's pretty obvious. It does need to align with the West. Yes, it's entertaining Russia, but unfortunately, it is being forced to take sides. It's either the West or Russia. It's trying to sit in both camps. I think there will come a day, James, when India is going to have to make up its mind. It's either Russia or it's either the West.
Well, let's hope that we can find a way that India can play an intermediary to try and calm relations between the two nations. I won't hold my breath, but it is also something that people don't look at, and I think that there might be an opportunity, but there's just so much for India to address in terms of their extrajudicial killings and their women's rights and all of that they need to clean up their own backyard before they can start looking at others. But I think that this may be a big move in terms of global security. So.
Yeah, and I think you're right there. In when we look at India as a potential future superpower and a potential first world country, it does need to get its own house in order, and clearly at the moment its own house is in a bit of a mess. Okay, let's move on to our comments section, and as always, a big thank you to so many of you who sent in lots and lots of very interesting comments, particularly over one of our stories last week. We had lots and lots of really, really interesting and educational and very fascinating comments, introducing all sorts of different angles of thought. But we had one particularly interesting and long comment, which I wanted to highlight as our first comment. And quite concerning, this comment. And this person says that they've written comments several times on here, particularly about the Sunday Guardian. Of course, we talked about the Sunday Guardian reporting Nikhil Gupta's interview. And he rightly highlights the point, don't confuse it with The Guardian, the UK Guardian, which is a very highly respected, primarily left-wing news outlet here in the UK, but it is a very good newspaper in the UK with a very good team of investigative journalists who always, I would say always, but regularly report very well-researched and very pro-Sikh articles, particularly the reports about transnational repression on a regular basis. But yes, the Sunday Guardian has used an age-old trick here, where it's used the branding of a very well-respected Western news outlet and called itself the Sunday Guardian, when in fact it's just a pet project of the Indian elite, let's call it in simple terms. Yeah, this person said his comments are regularly deleted, no matter how many times that they've tried to post them up. And find this happens on many Sikh-based channels. Yeah, so it's not just us, James. Is it automatic or is it done manually? Who is doing it? Yeah, this is a good question. We don't know. We do, of course, there is an automatic filter on YouTube. We've discovered that. It seems on the face of it, primarily just to remove offensive remarks and bad language. But one wonders if, and certainly this person's saying that there are key words that are being filtered out. So if you post up something with certain keywords, it's not just being filtered out and put into the area where we get the ability to approve them. They're just disappearing. They're just absolutely not appearing at all on the platform. And this person rightly points out these big platforms do work with regimes. And I notice how you've had to use the word, how you've had to spell the word regime, because again, a potential keyword that is filtering out. Recent elections in India utilise large platforms. So any comments mentioning these keywords seem to be deleted. Absolutely. Free speech is being curbed, even for those who think they're in the countries where they can express themselves freely. This is a very interesting point, James. I don't know if this happens in Canada. I've certainly noticed in many news outlets here in the UK, whether it's left-wing or right-wing, on comments section, is that comments that you may write that don't align with, let's say, certain narratives are automatically filtered out. They never appear. And it's very questionable. We noticed this on COVID, for example. Anybody who questioned the whole COVID narrative, questioned the vaccine narrative, or politically, who happened to question immigration is another good example. Most news outlets, if you put up certain comments questioning the whole immigration agenda, again, those are filtered out and never appears. So, James, I don't know if you find this in Canada, but certainly here in the UK, as this person points out, it's not just India. This is happening. It happens across the West too.
Yeah, and something that people need to keep in mind as well is that with a population of, over 1 billion people, India is a very large market for tech companies to get involved in. And a lot of social media platforms have been fighting to get into that market because it's so lucrative. And what's happened is that they have hit regulatory hurdles and so forth. But when they've now started investing in platforms that are actually Indian-based, the regulations seem to have been reduced. And now they're getting more green lights for big tech companies to go into that market. It makes you wonder if a part of the reduced regulations had something to do with them increasing the filters and the censorship on these comments and just other platforms.
Yeah, I think this is such a pertinent and relevant point that's been raised here because, again, we all must be very, very vigilant to this. We do know that the intelligence services do have I'm thinking the right word. They have a handle or certainly they have an influence, and I think that's an understatement. They have an influence on big tech, companies like Google, of course, who own YouTube, Twitter, for example, Facebook, all these high-tech companies that control our social media. We do know that intelligence services and, by extension, governments, therefore have some control over these platforms, and therefore they have some influence and control over what is shown, what comments are shown, what narratives, what agendas are rolled out, because it's very easy to shape a narrative on social media by just filtering out one side and only allowing through another side. These do influence elections, these do influence whole populations' points of view. Of course, we all form our own opinions based upon what we read, see and hear. And of course, he who controls the narrative controls the population. So, very important point this. We all, in all our nations, must be absolutely vigilant to this. Always question what you see, hear or read. Always think and always look for an alternative. Always look for a different perspective. And then form your opinions based on both sides of every argument. So thank you for this message. And the final comment is very concerning. It's the 4th time this person's written this message. The 4th time this person's tried to get this message through and having to reword and use all sorts of little techniques to filter. And what this does highlight, if this is genuine, this does highlight the very simple fact that there is something afoot, there is something going on, filtering out our comments. And of course, that does by extension imply that we are indeed being shadow banned. So thank you very much indeed for that comment. Right, we talk about the Sunday Guardian, James, and lots of people have pointed out the links here. The plot thickens, as it turns out. The BJP says the Sunday Guardian is owned by Manu Sharma. the killer of Jessica Lang. Well, actually, I think it's his father who actually owns the Sunday Guardian. But thank you. You're absolutely right pointing this out, as we have indeed pointed out in yesterday's show. Now, what I didn't know, and I don't know if this is true, is that this person says that Manu Sharma is also a friend of Nikhil Gupta. And apparently Nikhil Gupta was actually present in that bar when Manu Sharma shot and killed Jessica Lal. Wow, I didn't know this. If this is true, this, yeah, I mean, wow, what does this even imply? I mean, it just implies that this plot is deep and thick and there's all sorts of intricate networks going on here. So thank you for pointing that out. Well, maybe we'll have to investigate that further. And Pacific Bridge says that the Sunday Guardian is owned actually, by Vinod Sharma, the father, but he's also the son-in-law of former Indian president. Nikhil Gupta, under oath, and reminds us, as actually we haven't mentioned recently, we should have mentioned this, that Gupta actually said under oath in Prague that he admitted his role in transnational repression and the involvement of the Indian state. This interview will actually backfire in India. I think it may well do. Yes, of course, we did say that in one of his pleas, Nikhil Gupta did actually admit the fact that he was effectively working for the Indian state. So thank you for reminding us of that. And then Truth Seeker at great length points out, it's fake news. It's fake news propaganda by India. Absolutely. This endorses what we've been saying about the Sunday Guardian, its ownership and its links to the Indian government. Of course it's fake news. But Truth Seeker goes actually a step further and says, actually, do you really think that an Indian journalist got an exclusive interview with Gupta in the US prison? No, actually, Truth Seeker actually thinks the whole thing was made up. In fact, I think, as we said, James, it's quite likely that the interview was so formal and sterile, it did appear actually a little bit contrived and concocted. So Truth Seeker comes out with that very same point. But what interestingly Truth Seeker does point out is that you point out where is it? The way this works is systematically by the Gaudiya media, where they publish an outrageous story, then the rest of the Indian media pick it up and become the mouthpiece for the story, then does talk shows that number in the thousands. This whole process, this whole media process, and we talked about it in my podcast last week about misinformation. There is this tried and tested method of the Indian media where the story is written by a small team of people with this agenda. It's then disseminated by these key media outlets in India. That's then picked up by the aggregating news outlets like Yahoo, for example. And of course, people are rolled out across, as you rightly say, across the talk show circuit. And suddenly it becomes mainstream news and people believe it for what it is. They take it absolutely at face value without actually investigating the truth behind it. So, yeah, it's a well tried and tested method. And finally, Robert Chapman says and reminds us a statistic that we do like to trot out regularly. Yeah, India is currently ranked 159th out of 180 nations analysed. All media is government controlled. No interview with Nikhil Gupta of any sort took place. Yeah, like the previous comment, questions the whole credibility of the actual interview, and then rightly points out to the fact that India. Clearly there is an anti-US agenda going on here, but India, like we said, James, needs to get its own house in order before it starts taking on the US. Agreed, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. But, you could look at it Modi's way, where he would look at these numbers and go, hey, at least we're not 180.
Well, and of course, all the right wing in India. If you read the right wing press, they see the statistics, say, oh, it's biased. Oh no, it's deliberate anti-India agenda. So they think there's some conspiracy behind this. Apart from the fact that the people who actually put this press index together are actually pretty independent. There is no agenda there. And North Korea sits very close to India in this. Again, is it an agenda against North Korea? No, it's not. It's and the evidence is there for all to see. We report the same evidence regularly. You only need to look at J&K. And again, we regularly report on how news outlets in J&K are closed down for criticising the government. That's not conspiracy. That's not made up. It's happening daily. So to the right wing of India, look, wake up, please. Right. And final set of comments. Azad Singh made a couple of comments. BJP's MP, and this again comes back to our story, James, about sexual violence against women. The BJP's MP from Chandigarh, Kiran Kaur, said on media, that rape is part of Indian culture. There's proof of this. Most commenters here must be knowing about this. Thank you for pointing this out. James, as we said, it's cultural. And even an MP, a BJP MP, has admitted that rape is part of Indian culture. That's quite a shock, isn't it?
It is, but something that we've covered previously and, call for changes in the mindset.
Yeah, and I think even if an MP is calling this out, something has to be done. The first part of the problem is recognise there is a problem. Yeah, at least people are recognising there's a problem. Now, next stage is sorting it out. So, but Azad then goes on. This is, I suspect this comment was in response to when somebody had made a blanket stereotype of Hindus, saying I think they were oily and untrustworthy or something. And we said, well, look, come on, you can't blanket label all Hindus as that. Azad actually says, well, look, come on. It was the majority of Hindus, who gave a landslide victory in 1985 to the Congress Party, who were actually behind. They stoked up the genocides in 1984. And the same Hindus effectively did the same by putting the BJP into power, who were behind the 2002 anti-Muslim riots. Does this not show their collective genocidal mindset and mob mentality? Ooh, I think that's a good point, and I think there are nuances here. I think the answer is that, again, I don't think you can blame every Hindu, certainly for the genocides, and you can't blame every Hindu for the terrible things that have happened under the name of political parties. Otherwise, I suppose you could almost, let's go back to the 1930s Germany. Could you blame every single German for voting for the Nazi Party, for the atrocities of the Nazis? I don't know. My answer to that is no. Your opinions may differ. James, what's your opinion on that?
Again, I don't like to paint everyone with the same brush. I think that there are amazing people that are Hindu, that are in India. I just don't see, but it's amazing how a mob mentality and manipulation and misinformation can form, events of history. And looking back, we've seen it time and time again. So yeah, I don't like to paint everyone with the same brush by any means.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, James. I think people are easily manipulated. The majority of every nation, the population, is easily manipulated. It's not just native to India. It happens over the world, even in the West. Populations are very easily manipulated by the narrative that they are fed. So, can you therefore blame those people for being sheep, let's call them in offensive terms? Can you blame people for being so easily manipulated into supporting a regime that then goes on to commit atrocities? Yeah, it's a nuanced argument. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Okay, Sukhwant. In Canada, America and the UK. I don't know if this is true, and it's quite frightening if it is, that you claim that there are 10,000 RAW agents active on secret operations. Well, I don't know if that number is true, but certainly I think it's clear, James, that amongst our countries, there are certainly an awful lot of RAW agents who are active. We do know, obviously, the transnational repression is happening on a regular basis. You've reported, James, regularly on the investigation that the Canadian government did recently and what that uncovered beneath the surface of what's going on behind the scenes. And they all, again, driven by RAW agents. So, yeah, I think this person probably is, well, the numbers may be exaggerated, but certainly there are agents very active in our countries, are they not, James?
Oh, absolutely. And not just India. I mean, here in Canada, we found secret Chinese police stations as well that have been shut down over the last 2 years. So it wouldn't surprise me that there are large numbers. I think that number, as you said, Angus, may be slightly exaggerated, but I do believe that, there are a lot more agents wandering our streets than we realize. And hey, we're guilty of it too. I'm sure Canada's got agents in other countries. The US has CIA in other countries. So, it works both ways.
Yeah, that is true. I was going to say, but then we don't take part in transnational repression like India does. Again, we're talking about the hypocritical argument. We have interfered overseas, but we don't. Well, again, I was going to say we don't go around assassinating people. Actually, we do. The US particularly has been assassinating terrorists extrajudicially. And again, we do call out that hypocrisy. I would, however, in mitigation of that, say, look, the terrorists that we take out are actually known terrorists who do build bombs and are known universally to build bombs. The people that India are taking out are Khalistan campaigners. They are political opponents. There is a very, very distinct difference in killing a bomb maker, a known bomb maker who does and is known to have taken up arms. And usually they're actually quite often taken out with bearing arms, whereas Hardeep Singh Nijjar was just leaving his Gurdwara. Avtar Singh Kandar was just living at home peacefully. All these people, Gurpatran Singh Panoon was just carrying out his practice as a political campaigner. They're not terrorists. So there is a very, very clear distinction here. So, and then, Flopjat says, final comment, Mr. Angus, please be careful of the Indian government. They might offer you some dollars to stop anchoring with satellite TV for Sikhism and their freedom. Oh, to be honest, I'm more concerned about transnational repression. I think I'm more concerned about we've seen what the Indian government and their agents are capable of. I don't even know how to answer this, other than where my loyalties lie. If I am shut up, then it would be a very sad day. But we will continue as long as we can to speak out for the community and stand up for human rights, for all human rights. And as I said, I am a great lover of India. I love the Indian people. I love its culture. I love its diversity. And I would one day love to freely travel around India. But as I say, all of us live in fear. All of us who speak up against the Indian regime, we are living in fear. That's not democracy. That is the sign of a totalitarian state. James and I will continue for as long as we can to speak up for the community. And, we'll let fate take its course. But, James, I don't know how to answer this one. Do you?
All I can say is that they better have 10,000 agents. If they're going to take me out and put my fat ass in a car, they're going to need 10,000 to lift me.
Well, all I would say to India is, look, if you want to be a democracy, you've got to thicken your skin. You've got to allow people like us to exist. You've always got to allow people free speech. If you don't like it, then come up with a better message. Don't fight it with arms. Just come up with a better message and people will support you. Simple as that. Okay,
and
unfortunately we have...
If you want to come on our show and debate it with us, they can do that too.
Indeed. Okay, but unfortunately we are well over time as always, so we must wrap up the show for another day. But of course, that was Perspectives. Please don't forget to keep those comments coming in. Thanks so much for all the comments, as they have been pouring in, and we do love to read them, as you well know. Don't forget, you can of course message us directly at message@satellitetv.com if there's something you'd like to send us directly that you don't want to put in the public comments. And please do keep those messages coming in, and do keep the support coming in. Do spread the word that we exist. Clearly, we are being shadow banned, and many of your comments are being filtered out, it would appear. So do keep trying. Do keep trying to get those comments through to us, and we will beat the system one way or another. But in the meantime, we must wrap things up. It is a goodbye from me, and it is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.